Can you see it? Okay, great.
Yes. And then from here, I'm just going to make sure, Dr. Shalz, that everybody has been admitted because we've got a couple people still joining us. So I want to make sure nobody gets turned away. All right. Okay, and then I think we're ready to go. So Dr. Shalz, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to take this opportunity to go ahead and pass that baton on to you.
All righty. Okay, hold on. Let me just get my, yeah, there we go. I think, okay. All righty. Just get that down. Trying to bring up my view here. There we go. Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me here. I'm Dr. Jennifer Shalz, and I'm the medical director of the Lifestyle Medicine Department at St. Luke's Health System. And I'm actually located in the South Meridian YMCA here in Meridian, Idaho. And I've been working with Mary for many, many years, collaborating on a lot of different areas. And I'm just honored to be asked to speak as part of this HOPE series, where we are working on helping people to optimize their brain health. And I hope to become part of the community of people here in Idaho that are coming together to really pay attention to the science and help ourselves and our patients to really thrive. And today I'm hoping that those of you listening are going to be able to take away some easily usable information that you can start now applying to your life when it comes to health habits that can help you with functioning better and now with your brain health as well as in the future. So I am going to go ahead and start. Um, I was asked to talk about cognitive resilience. And so I want to define this specifically. And really, it's about our ability to maintain our brain's thinking function despite all the damage that we may have and insults to our brain that we may experience as we're going through life. And super important, as you'll see, that we build that up as much as we can through life. And that's really the focus of this. What can we do to build our brain up now and help it to thrive? And what is this cognitive function that we're talking about, that we want to build our cognitive function? And it's all about the thinking functions of the brain. So learning, making memories, the executive functions, problem solving, making decisions, and of course also interpreting information from our five senses. And why would we want to do this? The reason, and this is documented in a journal article that was published in the last 12 months that I think many of you are aware of, that came from Lancet, the journal Lancet. They assert that the reason we want to do this is that there is clear scientific evidence at this point that if we can maintain good physical health, and we're going to determine what that means, and if we're involved in activities with others, and we're involved in thinking activities, there's less chance of dementia, despite, like I said, insults to our brain that may occur throughout our life. And that is super exciting because, as you know, the incidence of dementia appears to be growing and growing in our society. So dementia is a condition that causes progressive loss of many things: our executive function, our memory, our language. And these changes are permanent, and they interfere with who we are and what we do and our independence. And obviously, it's caused by progressive damage to brain cells and not considered a normal part of aging. It's not just something that we should all be expecting to experience. And unfortunately, at this point, there's no cure. Now, there may be, I mean, hopefully, maybe one day, but right now, there are prevention strategies, and that's what we're going to be focusing on. And it's not a single disease either. And I think it's important to point this out that Alzheimer's disease, yes, this is the most common, but Alzheimer's doesn't necessarily just occur by itself. Often it's accompanied by vascular dementia as well. This is where there's poor blood vessel health. And there's another type of dementia that many people have too, Lewy body dementia, which has a lot of Parkinson-like characteristics. Not that it is Parkinson's related, but it has those characteristics, has other characteristics like hallucinations, which are not necessarily present in Alzheimer's disease. And then there's another type of dementia which can occur more commonly in younger people who are getting premature dementia, frontotemporal dementia, where there's a really marked change in people's personality up front, and social skills, et cetera. So these are sort of the more common dementias, and like I said, often you'll see a combination of dementias like Alzheimer's and vascular combined. And we have pretty well established risk factors at this point. And these risk factors are being identified more and more. And we have a couple of new risk factors that were discovered, or they're being discussed in our newest document that I'm going to review today. But pretty well established that there are both non-modifiable dementia risk factors, meaning we can't change them, and modifiable. And the two non-modifiable are aging. So even though it's not a normal part of aging per se, aging is certainly is a risk factor, and so is genetics. And again, just because you may have genetics, it's a non-modifiable risk, it doesn't necessarily mean you'll get dementia, but these are things that we don't necessarily have the ability to make our changes in our body. Now, I'm referring, when I said we have a document, I'm referring to something that I think you have seen before on this HOPE series, and that is a report from a commission that was brought together. It's experts that were brought together by the journal The Lancet to study what evidence is out there for dementia as a whole. So everything to do with dementia, both preventing dementia, intervening on dementia, and what type of care patients with dementia require, and what does the evidence tell us? And it's incredibly informative. And this is the latest report that was published within the last 12 months. And I'm going to be pulling a lot of information out of this document and then marrying it with what we know about lifestyle and lifestyle medicine, which is what I'm practicing. So this group of scientists right up front emphasized in 2024 that there are absolutely science-backed reasons, evidence that we should be taking some steps to encourage people to lower their dementia risk. And the reasons are that we could increase the number of healthy years of people's lives. We can increase the number of functional, enjoyable years. And even if someone develops dementia, that we can shorten the duration of their illness if you are practicing if you're trying to lower your risk. And the earlier in life that you start with these, and midlife is certainly a good time, but it's never too late, the better it is. And what I think is really fascinating is that even if you have this so-called non-modifiable risk, right, a genetic risk for dementia, which, by the way, I actually know that I have, you can still lower your risk. And that is very exciting, and it certainly gives many, many people hope. So these are the current recognized 14 modifiable dementia risk factors. Again, these are the changeable factors. Now, first of all, lower education and lower cognitive activities are thought to be a risk factor. So again, this is something that could be changed over time. People might say, air pollution, is that really changeable for me? Do I have agency over that myself? And, maybe that's more of a public policy issue. Maybe that's more about how you behave when there is a lot of air pollution in your environment, trying to protect yourself. Traumatic brain injury, that's more about trying to prevent traumatic brain injury. But, we do have agency over treating any hearing loss. We do have agency over treating vision loss. And by the way, this is a new one that the Lancet actually called out, that this group called out on this for 2024, that untreated vision loss is now thought to be a risk factor for dementia. And the most common untreated vision loss factor is actually cataracts. So making sure that those are treated when they're supposed to be treated. Social isolation, this is a lifestyle factor that we'll talk about more, along with mood problems like depression. And then there's other lifestyle factors here: smoking, excessive alcohol consumption, physical inactivity, and then there's lifestyle-related disease factors: excessive weight, LDL cholesterol. This is, by the way, a new factor. I think this was discussed in the series already, but LDL cholesterol is a new factor that they've recognized raises your dementia risk. And then diabetes and high blood pressure. I'm going to call out here right now that excessive weight or obesity, LDL cholesterol, diabetes, high blood pressure, all of those are not just risk factors for dementia. These are considered also cardiovascular risk factors. And that's an important point to acknowledge. Now, the Lancet did a great job calling out that if we start addressing these risk factors, that there are some distinct physiologic ways that we can help prevent and delay dementia. And for me, I think it's really a great way to understand, why do these things work? Why, what's the, what am I doing to really help myself? And first of all of these appear to be at least the, reducing the cardiovascular risk factors, and even reducing air pollution, by the way, and reducing head injury, as well as reducing depression, physical activity, and minimizing alcohol, decrease blood vessel damage. Super important, right? Blood vessel damage is a main cause of brain injury, and also cardiovascular injury. So very important to know that good blood vessel health is important for all of our vital organs. And what's good for the heart is good for the brain, and blood vessels are a main part of that. So anything we do that can improve our blood vessel health is going to improve our brain health, including preventing and delaying dementia. The next is that most of these items actually also reduce impact on the neurons, that it reduces damage to our neurons, okay? Thirdly, it reduces inflammation in the brain. And I want you to remember that inflammation is a problem, and we'll talk a little bit more about that and how it also causes problems elsewhere. And lastly, importantly, building cognitive and brain reserve, that higher education, continuing thinking activities, physical activity, minimizing alcohol intake, increasing your social contact, making sure your senses are working well by addressing your hearing loss and your visual loss, build your cognitive and brain reserve. You're building up more brain. Very important, because if you can build up more brain volume, if you have some damage, you can really weather it better And so that can help you prevent and delay dementia. So blood vessel health, you want to maintain that. You want to prevent neuron damage. You want to reduce inflammation in your brain, and you want to build your brain volume up. All of these things help that. And again, I think you've seen this before, but if you eliminate these 14 risks, or if we do as a population, theoretically, these authors are saying that we could prevent or delay 45% of the cases of dementia in our society. I mean, that would be amazing, amazing to decrease the suffering that people go through. And also, of course, the cost to society on so many different levels. And the recommendation, as they stated prior, was, midlife, a lot of these um, risks are occurring in midlife and best addressed in midlife. As you can see, early life is has to do with, and this is really important for sort of public policy too, is really helping to address early life education, and making sure that is robust in our society. And then in later life, you can see that there is, it's very important to address social isolation. This is very common in our elderly population, as well as visual loss, and interestingly, air pollution, probably as we're living longer, and in late life, we're being exposed to more and more air pollution. So interestingly, it's now very well established through decades of evidence that 80% of chronic diseases that are common in the United States are caused by lifestyle. And these diseases include the diseases that contribute to dementia. So cardiovascular disease, which is is caused by high blood pressure and high cholesterol, stroke, which is a cardiovascular disease, and diabetes, a metabolic disease, again, which is a contributor to both stroke and cardiovascular disease, and all of these associated with dementia. And lifestyle medicine, which is a newish subspecialty, it really got started about 20 years ago, and the board certification started in 2017. And the reason we need an actual newish subspecialty called lifestyle medicine is because most of us, I would say 99% of us, physicians and other medical providers, did not experience much of education in our undergrad or even our postgrad training in lifestyle as medicine, meaning we didn't get a lot of education on nutrition. We didn't get a lot of education on exercise. We didn't get a lot of education on sleep management. And we certainly didn't get a lot of education on how to help people with behavior change. And so this new subspecialty has risen up because of the overwhelming epidemic of chronic illness. And as I stated, the epidemic that's being really driven by lifestyle. And we're really noting that it's been an inadequate, we've been inadequate in really treating it well enough with our medications and procedures alone. And so this lifestyle medicine subspecialty is really trying to use science-based lifestyle interventions to improve health behaviors. And we're trying to prevent chronic disease in the first place, treat it if we have it, and or people have it, try to prevent it from progressing, and possibly even put it into remission. And it's very interesting what could potentially be put into remission. And the focus is on 6 key pillars. This is what the American College of Lifestyle Medicine tells us to focus on. So you'll recognize that many of these are on that list of what we should focus on to prevent dementia. So regular physical activity, positive social connection, avoidance of risky substances like nicotine and alcohol, stress management or mood management. And also on here, healthy eating, healthy diet, and restorative sleep. And so we'll talk about this a little bit more. Additionally, it's not just the American College of Lifestyle Medicine that is asserting that we should be focusing on these areas and not only using the evidence that's there, but creating, having more science and more study of the effectiveness of these interventions. But it's also the American Heart Association and the American College of Cardiology, and they have come up with what they call the Life's Essential Eight. And again, this kind of reflects also what this Lancet article is talking about with the risk factors for dementia. And they are recommending to decrease cardiovascular risk, so heart disease and stroke risk, healthy diet, physical activity, decrease nicotine exposure, improve your sleep. And then they mention obesity or body weight, blood cholesterol, blood sugar, blood pressure, right? This is all the same. And in fact, there's been a scientific article that looked at, or study that looked at a few years ago, that the people who had higher scores, better scores on Life's Essential Eight actually had a lower dementia risk. So, there's a growing body of science saying, yep, the more you focus on these risk factors, the better you seem to do. Now, I think the question people often have is, okay, I think I've heard this so much, I've even heard it from my grandmother, I should be eating more fruits and vegetables, but how do unhealthy behaviors lead to chronic disease? How does it even work? And it really has to do with the immune system, is what we think. There seems to be sort of this unifying pathophysiologic process, and the immune system really is there to work, of course, on our behalf. And so when the body is being threatened, the immune system responds appropriately by releasing inflammatory proteins. And if it's a big stressor, the immune system usually releases a lot of inflammatory proteins to try to protect us and have the inflammatory proteins take care of the problem, essentially, for us. Now, it's a very, very complex system, so I'm oversimplifying it. But once that problem is taken care of, the inflammatory proteins are recycled and they go away. And if it's a small problem, they'll release a small amount of proteins, and the same thing will happen. And this goes on, throughout our days, throughout our weeks. The immune system is being responsive, appropriately to our environment and what's affecting us. And what happens when we have sort of these everyday bodily stresses from habits or behaviors or toxin exposures that the body doesn't like toxin exposures, like, say, nicotine, or behaviors or non-behaviors, like being sedentary, for example. Our body really doesn't like to be sedentary. Or, say, excess adiposity. What I mean by that is really excess abdominal fat, for example. These are small, relatively small irritants to the body, but they're happening every day, all the time, and they're happening not just for a day or a week, maybe, but for a long period of time. And the immune system is reacting to that and releasing some inflammatory proteins in response to it. And some of those may be recycled over time. But really, if this is going on and on, eventually you'll have chronically elevated inflammation. So chronic inflammation. And what chronic inflammation does is that it starts to sort of turn against us. And they kind of, these inflammatory proteins are doing bad things when they don't have a target. And I have listed a few of the things they start to do. And I have listed it on how it can actually start leading to dementia. So first of all, it increases insulin resistance. Chronic inflammation leads to increased insulin resistance. That's the pathophysiology behind type 2 diabetes. And type 2 diabetes does increase risk for dementia, but also insulin resistance on its own changes the metabolism of the brain cells too, and can damage brain cells. So that in itself can lead to dementia. Increased blood clotting increases risk for stroke. It could also increase the blood vessel dysfunction, where blood vessels don't open and close appropriately. That also can increase risk for stroke, increase risk for high blood pressure. Again, all of these risks for dementia are piling up here. This inflammation can actually directly damage tissue. In directly damaging tissue and organs, it can lead to type 2 diabetes. It can increase risk for stroke, high blood pressure, and it can directly damage brain cells. And it affects genetic expression. When you have a high amount of chronic inflammation, you can actually have more negative genetic expression, have more actual turning on your gene for dementia, versus decreasing your amount of inflammation actually might be able to turn off your gene for dementia and maybe turn on some protective genes. That's a possibility. And then lastly, and this is a whole new frontier of medicine really, is about our gut microbiome. And we do know that bacteria that live in our gastrointestinal tract, primarily in our colon, definitely play a central role in interacting with all of the organ systems in our body, but certainly with our metabolism and with our brain health as well. And gut microbiome interacts with our body in contributing to inflammation and or protecting us from inflammation or decreasing inflammation. And gut microbiome can protect us from type 2 diabetes, stroke, and can help us with healthy brain, or it can do the opposite depending on what's happening in the gut microbiome. So it's quite complicated, but there's a role for inflammation and gut microbiome together as well. So it's pretty fascinating stuff. So there is definitely physiology, more physiology to learn, but it seems like this is the unifying pathway, which explains why there's so much interconnectivity amongst all of these conditions. So let's discuss then sort of the use of these 6 pillars of lifestyle in addressing these risk factors. And what I'm going to do is go over from this paper really what has been recommended, or what they're stating is actually what's been found out, the role of, say, physical activity and all of the other lifestyle factors in dementia, and all of these other conditions, and then talk about what we know right now from the evidence about health habits and what we should use as our North Star recommendations for behaviors. So what we know about physical activity and dementia right now is that it's associated with decreased dementia risk no matter how old we are. So, in an optimal world, we would remain physically active throughout our entire life versus, being sedentary. And, it's very interesting. I'm actually an internist. I don't think I said that, but as an internist and, treating people, with a lot of complex illness throughout my career, I will say I've met a lot of patients who say, oh, I did a lot of exercise back in the military. I don't think I want to exercise anymore. I kind of did my exercise, or I really, I exercised back in high school. I was I was a high school football player or something like that. It doesn't work that way. I mean, we have to remain obviously physically active throughout our lives for it to work. And it's interesting that when people go, and we see this actually in cardiac rehab, I'm the medical director of those programs as well, that in cardiac rehab, when people go from extremely sedentary, they haven't exercised in like 20 years, and then we start having them move, it's unbelievably effective on their function and how they feel when they go from so sedentary to regular exercise. And it's the same thing with dementia prevention, that people's cognition really improves when they go from being sedentary for so long to starting to exercise regularly. And actually, the higher the amount of exercise we all have, the better it is, as I say here, to decrease dementia risk. And the mechanisms seem to be improved blood flow, but also improved plasticity of our neurons, that we get more pruning of our neurons and more growth of our neurons. And it's reducing inflammation in our brain. It's reducing, having a good effect on our blood pressure and our metabolism, our blood sugar, and that more exercise means a larger brain volume. So there's that cognitive reserve. We're having larger brain volume. And so the physical activity recommendation is really the same from the American College of Lifestyle Medicine and the American Heart Association, that we should be exercising 150 to 300 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic exercise. So that's, like walking or, stationary bike or biking. Or if you're doing vigorous exercise, half that amount per week. And adding resistance or strength training. Resistance training, people don't realize this, and I think this is this is newer for physicians even to be recommending, but we should all be doing it no matter our age or our physical condition. 60 to 90 minutes at least a week, so divided across 2 to 3 sessions. And with doing 60 to 90 minutes, we are not only improving our cardiovascular health dramatically, we are improving our metabolic health, we're improving our functioning, we're improving our bone health, we're improving our ability to manage our weight, we're improving our mood, we're improving our sleep, but we're improving our dementia risk. And I was even reading that lower body, large muscle resistance training seems to be incredibly effective for dementia prevention. So really, really important to do both. So what do we know about stress management and dementia? And I'm kind of lumping here together stress management and, depression, because interestingly, this Lancet article called out that anxiety disorders, if it's just anxiety, don't really seem to affect dementia risk. It's really more about depression, although, anxiety unchecked can often lead or contribute to someone's depression, but it's really depression that is the condition that increases dementia risk, especially if it arises in midlife. And it's been found that if we treat it with medications or therapy, that it does seem to help reduce risk, and of course it improves our quality of life. Now the mechanism appears to be that it causes an inflammatory response to have unchecked depression. And additionally, there's a suggestion that maybe it's also because self-care in general is decreased if depression is not addressed well, and also that it may be complicated by less interaction with others. So again, that sort of increase in brain volume that you get from interacting with other people, you don't have that because you're reducing social contact. So the recommendation for stress management is certainly to treat your depression. So therapy, medications, lifestyle can be it can be an adjunct to treating depression. That's like exercise is very powerful for helping to treat depression. And then identifying coping mechanisms and stress reduction techniques. So what do we know about risky substance use and dementia? So midlife smoking increases dementia risk. And of course, stronger the earlier you start. But I thought what was interesting is that there didn't seem to be an increased risk in former smokers. So really, that's a good reason to quit. I have heard from a lot of smokers over the years that they feel like I've been smoking for all these years, why quit now? And we know for a lot of different conditions that affect people as they're getting older, that quitting smoking always will have some benefit. But especially when it comes to dementia, I think, of any conditions, this is one to be concerned about, right? And since it gets to the heart of who you are. So clear benefit in quitting smoking. Also, alcohol. Drinking more than 12 alcoholic beverages increases per week, increases the risk of dementia. And this is quite a different turn. When I went to med school and residency, drinking alcohol was like a health food. I don't know if people remember this, but it was like, 1 to 2 drinks, a week or a day, is good for what ails you, basically. And, red wine preferred, that kind of thing. And we really have a lot more evidence these days that alcohol is not a health food. It definitely has negative health effects, including, of course, cancer risk. I know everyone's probably heard this, definitely out in the news, but also it increases your risk for high blood pressure, atrial fibrillation, congestive heart failure. And now it's, this Lancet article review has been emphasizing that, and they even gave it a number, that regular consumption of a higher number of alcoholic drinks per week can increase your risk. They recommend to drink less than that, less than 1 drink a day. I will tell you that the American Heart Association, American College of Cardiology, they're actually recommending if you're going to drink 3 drinks per week or less. So what's the recommendation? Never smoke or quit as soon as you can. And then avoiding alcohol or drinking less than a small glass daily. That's what's recommended. So what do we know about social connection and dementia? Well, there's a shrinkage that happens with the brain when we're not interacting with other people. Super important to know that we know that if you are socially isolated, that it increases your risk. And it was defined by these criteria, being socially isolated. Living alone is one, but that's not the only one. It has to have 2 out of the 3. And the other is seeing your loved ones less than once a month and living alone, or living alone and not participating in, if you're not participating in any weekly group activities. I thought that was really interesting. So, living alone is not enough. It's these other things as well. So, and then also persistent loneliness. You could be social isolation and persistent loneliness are 2 different things often, but that is also associated. Any type of social contact. It doesn't have to just be the people you love. It can be really with anybody, your neighbors, the people at the grocery store, people at church. Anyone seems to help build our brain reserve. It helps to build those neurons and the volume in our brain. So, and it also, to be around other people, promotes healthy behaviors as well, and just generally decreases inflammation. So again, when you are lonely or having social isolation, you have the experience of inflammation. So 2 or more social contacts a week, recommended, and engaging also in 2 or more cognitive activities a week, which often can be done with people. Now, I mentioned that blood vessels, super important to keep healthy. They are responsible for keeping all of our organs healthy. So our vital organs, including our heart and our brains. And so really addressing our vascular risk factors, the ones that were called out in our list of 14 factors. And let's discuss those next. So what we know about obesity and dementia, we know that in your midlife, if you start having excessive weight, that can be associated with increased dementia risk. And particularly, it's not, just all over, increased weight. It really has to do more with abdominal fat tissue. It seems like it affects our risk. And the mechanism seems to be increased inflammation, increased cortisol with increased inflammation, but also that there's negative health consequences associated with excess abdominal fat tissue, and that's diabetes and heart disease and high blood pressure, right? So all interconnected. And there was a trial study that was done last year or published last year with the MIND diet, and they looked at people who were overweight and they were cognitively, they were unimpaired, they had normal cognition, but they had a family history of dementia. They were thought to be at high risk for developing dementia, and they put them on the MIND diet and followed them over 3 years, and they compared those who followed the MIND diet to and lost weight, so 10% plus weight loss over 3 years. These people improved cognition versus those who ate, whatever they wanted, and actually ended up gaining weight. And they saw that those who lost 10% plus weight actually improved their cognition, which is interesting. So it improved from baseline. And so these were people who didn't have any dementia yet, but were considered at high risk. So I thought that was sort of interesting, that they improved cognition versus those who gained weight had pretty much stayed about the same. I don't know that they really went down. What we know about type 2 diabetes and dementia is that, again, midlife diabetes increases the risk of dementia, especially if you've had it for a long time, but primarily if it's been poorly controlled. And treatment definitely reduces your dementia risk. And these newer medications that we're using now for dementia risk seem to maybe be more favorable when it comes to dementia risk. They're also they're quite effective. So these newer medications, probably you've heard of them: Ozempic, Mounjaro, you've seen them on TV all the time, Fariga, Jardiance. These are medications that also help with weight loss, and they also help with cardiovascular risk. So for some reason, and again, we probably don't quite understand why, they do seem to be having these medications may help with dementia risk, and there's more study that needs to be done there. But for type 2 diabetes itself, the mechanism for why it causes dementia is that, again, it affects the blood vessels and makes them unhealthy and increases stroke risk, but also that insulin resistance causes a negative problem with brain metabolism. It increases the amyloid or the protein buildup in our brain, makes it more toxic, and in general increases inflammation in the brain. For hypertension, increases risk of dementia, and treating it reduces the risk. And certain blood pressure medications actually might be even the best in terms of decreasing dementia risk. I'm not really sure why that is. I know that they're quite effective. Those particular medications we do reach for as top choices for treating blood pressure. And then less than or equal to 120/80 is considered optimal blood pressure control, but certainly less than 130 is what we really want to make sure our as in terms of our population remains under. So the newest risk factor is high LDL cholesterol. Now, we've known for years that high LDL cholesterol is associated with cardiovascular disease, so coronary artery disease and heart attacks, and stroke. And we also know that statin use protects us from having heart attacks and from having strokes. And now, according to the evidence, high LDL cholesterol appears to increase risk of dementia, and that statin use is now found to be associated with decreased dementia risk, which is interesting because at some point there was a question of whether statin use was actually increasing risk of dementia. And the LDL goal for most of the population should be less than 100 for most of us. But if you have type 2 diabetes or you have cardiovascular disease, the lower the better, and we go for less than 70 generally. The mechanism is that the brain cholesterol, because you do get cholesterol in your brain, if it's excessive, it can increase your stroke risk and also these amyloid proteins in your brain. So what's really notable too is that we have a couple of other lifestyle factors. Again, these are part of the 6 pillars and also part of Life's Essential 8 on nutrition and sleep that need some more studies before we can call out exactly, this is according to the Lancet paper, we can call out exact mechanisms. But there are definitely strong associations with nutrition and dementia. I'm sure you're very well aware of that. So Mediterranean-like diet, and which is we'll talk about in a second, and high omega-3 fatty acids, as well as healthy gut bacteria, and that's association with certain foods, seem to decrease dementia risk. So that's the general association. And then a diet that's high in ultra-processed food and unhealthy gut bacteria seems to increase dementia risk. And so, like I said, there's a positive association between healthy diet and dementia, but it's inconsistent. And that's mostly because nutrition science is just, it's just really fraught and difficult. And so it's hard to say, exactly what diet items we absolutely need to have or not. But in general, we know that diets high in fruit and veg, low in the ultra processed foods, it prevents obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, and stroke. So that is what is recommended, and that is what you will get with the Mediterranean diet or the DASH diet, which is created to treat hypertension. And the MIND diet is a combination of those two, really. And so what is in these diets, really, it's a whole food, predominantly, not necessarily, solely, but predominantly plant-based diet, veggies, fruits, whole grains, beans, legumes, nuts, and seeds. So beautiful bowl here. And then for sleep, again, we need more studies. The persistently short sleep when you're in your mid or to older years seems to be a problem. If you're sleeping less than 6 hours a night consistently, 30% increased dementia risk versus 7 hours or more. And poor sleep quality, like sleep apnea, might be associated with dementia, possibly insomnia as well. So the recommendation is to work with someone to work towards 7 to 9 hours of sleep nightly and to treat sleep apnea and insomnia. But again, Lancet did not put sleep on their list of the 14 risks yet because they feel like some additional studies need to be done. So now that we kind of are talking about all of these various lifestyle factors, what about, now that you know it, how do you do it, right? That's the hard part when it comes to lifestyle. Education does not mean implementation. And so that's why we have the Department of Lifestyle Medicine. We have a lot of lifestyle programs to really help people do this, to help them with health coaching and experts on our multidisciplinary team. And there have been some studies looking at lifestyle intervention programs to prevent dementia. And they have shown that individualized goal setting, using health coaching, some and clinician visits with various members of the team, like an exercise physiologist, dietitian, do seem to be helpful. In fact, there was a study in 2015 called the Finger Study, which did show some positive results. But studies since that time have been a little bit inconsistent. However, last week, you may have heard that there was this breaking news, and it just seemed like everybody was talking about it, that there was a study that was just published that showed that there was a lifestyle intervention study, multidisciplinary, that had great results and really gives a lot of people a lot of hope that, wow, this stuff really does help. So what they did was, and it's called the US Pointer Study, and it was a randomized control study, and it was blinded on just a single blinded study. And what they did was looked into, can these, various aspects of lifestyle, so multiple at once, so physical activity, healthy diet, social engagement, and cognitive activities, as well as looking at people's, blood pressure and cholesterol and blood sugar and giving them feedback on that, can that help with people who are at high risk for having dementia? And they had 2,000 people. They divided them into two groups, randomized them. One group had structured, very intense support. They got 38 team meetings, and they exercised together and had brain activity, and they had very much a prescribed, 4 times a week aerobic exercise, 2 times a week resistance training. They were at a Y exercising. They had peer groups that they got together, and they did 3 times a week on a computer doing a cognitive activities, and then they got together with looking at every 6 months with I think a physician, going over their blood pressure and their cholesterol and their blood sugar and all of this. And then they had the other group was self-guided, and they had 6 meetings, peer meetings, over the 2 years. And then once a year they got together, and presumably with a physician, to go over their own personal data. And the interesting part was that, and they did 5 sites across the United States with a varied ethnicities, and people were 60 to 79 years old. And oh, and by the way, when they came in, they had sedentary lifestyle, they had a suboptimal diet. Everyone had both of those. And then they had 2 other sort of risk factors for cognitive decline. And what they found was that here's all the things that they did. But what they found was that they both improved. They both groups improved, but the structured group did better. They did quite a bit better. They did, significantly better. But at the same time, I think what's really good news is that both groups improved their cognition. And so both groups were at risk and both groups improved. But the ones that got a lot of goal setting and education and accountability, they're the ones that improved the most. And actually, not only that, they found that those who came in with the lowest cognitive scores actually did the best in both groups. And they also found that those who had genetic risk factors actually also did just as well as people who didn't. So that was also good. So what's happening is that they're going to look at the data. They're going to do, some other papers are going to come out of this, and they're going to look to trying to scale this up. And what is this going to look like for the rest of us moving forward? And maybe there'll be some examples of what we might want to try to achieve, even in our community. Maybe that'll be a, some kind of roadmap on what we could offer. So the summary of the recommendations here is to improve our lifestyle habits at any stage, right? And to decrease your risk of dementia. And here's all the recommendations, and they're very basic, and you're coming in already probably knowing these. And I will say that we do have some resources for you in our community, and they address all 6 pillars. So we have at St. Luke's, we have our lifestyle medicine department. You could get online and look what we have. We have an intense lifestyle medicine program that will address all 6 pillars and offers up to 22 meetings, actually within 6 to 8 months, in the first 6 to 8 months of a program. So that's similar to that other study. It offers an intense intervention for people who are looking to really make big change or need that support. And we also have on the other hand, we also have, some this is free online nutrition education program that you can do on your own online, self-guided, and you'll get these slides, and you can use the QR code to access this to help you with your nutrition. We have nicotine dependence. This is free, actually, and it is telephonic, or you can come in person. We have insomnia classes, but we also have cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia if you need that. Certainly the Y has this wonderful movement for memory program for people who are experiencing mild cognitive impairment and will benefit from moving, physical and cognitive activities and social activities. And then we've got the diabetes prevention program and active aging in Twin Falls and or Magic Valley and the Wood River Valley. We've got this College of Southern Idaho supervised exercise. It's free. Cooking Matters classes from the food bank and Project Filter for quitting tobacco. Cooking courses from Forks Over Knives, and this other cooking course to learn how to cook more plant-based Mediterranean diet, etc. Here's another program about eating healthy that's free online. And I've got tons of I have references, and I have these two great references at the end here from the Dr. Sherzai. One's the Alzheimer's solution, talking about lifestyle, and they have the 30-day Alzheimer's solution, which just got published, which was published in 2021. Okay, that's it.
Dr. Shalz, thank you. That was fantastic. Thank you for being so thorough too. We really appreciate it. I